Have you ever walked past someone twice and not even known it was your own family? That's exactly what happened to me. I walked right past this old man sitting alone on a bench. Then I walked past him again, and something about the way he sat there, it stopped me in my tracks. Because for 6 years, my family told me this man was dead. They told me he passed away. They told me we buried him. But there he was, sitting on a bench, very much alive. By the end of this video, you're going to find out exactly how I found him, what he said to me the moment he looked up, and the real reason my own family lied to me for 6 long years. And trust me, the reason is something you won't see coming. But before I get into it, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to who this man was to me before all of this happened. His name was my grandfather, and growing up, he was one of my favorite people in the whole world. I still remember the smell of his old leather jacket. He wore it everywhere, even in summer. I remember how he used to call me kiddo in this deep, raspy voice, like he'd smoked 1,000 cigarettes, even though he never smoked a day in his life. That was just his voice. Every weekend, I would go to his house. We'd sit on his porch, and he'd tell me the same 3 stories over and over again. And every single time, I'd act surprised at the ending just to make him happy. He wasn't perfect. Nobody in my family is. But he was steady. He was the one person who always showed up. Then one day, everything changed. I was told he passed away. I don't even remember exactly who told me first. It was almost like the news just floated through the family, quiet and fast, the way bad news does. There was no big phone call, I remember clearly. Just, he's gone. And here's the strange part. Looking back now, I never saw a funeral photo. I never visited a grave. When I asked to go, someone always had a reason why it wasn't the right time. Not yet. It's too hard right now. Maybe next month. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. When you're grieving, you don't question the small stuff. You just trust the people around you. So I grieved. I cried at what I thought was the end of his story. I moved on the way you're supposed to. I had no idea that 6 years later, I'd be walking down the street and I'd see him again. It was an ordinary afternoon. Nothing about that day felt different or special. I was walking down a street I don't usually take, on my way to run a quick errand, thinking about nothing in particular. That's when I saw him. An old man sitting alone on a bench. I didn't stop, not at first. My brain didn't even process it as anything unusual. Just another stranger on a bench. The kind of thing you see 100 times and forget a second later. I kept walking, but something tugged at me. A feeling I couldn't explain. My steps slowed down without me even deciding to slow them down. And a few seconds later, I turned around and looked back at him. There was something about the way he was sitting. His shoulders slouched forward in this specific way. His hands folded together, resting on his knee. It was a posture I'd seen 1,000 times, sitting across from him on that porch. I told myself I was imagining it. People remind us of other people all the time. That's normal. That's just how memory works. So I turned back around and kept walking. I walked almost a full block before I stopped completely, because my heart was pounding. And I couldn't figure out why a stranger on a bench would make my heart pound like that. I turned around again, and this time I walked back. With every step closer, that voice in my head kept saying, "This is stupid. This isn't him. He's gone." But my legs weren't listening to that voice anymore. I got close enough to see his face clearly for the first time, and that's when he looked up. Our eyes met, and for a second, neither of us said a word. I just stood there, frozen, staring at a face I hadn't seen in 6 years. A face I buried in my mind a long time ago, even without ever seeing a grave. Then I saw it, the small scar above his eyebrow, from a fall he had when he was a kid. The same scar I used to trace with my finger when I was little, asking him to tell me the story behind it one more time. It was him. He was alive. And in that moment, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or run. "Kiddo," he said. That one word broke something in me. It was the same raspy voice, the same nickname nobody else in my life ever called me. 6 years of grief cracked open right there on the sidewalk. I couldn't even speak at first. I just walked closer and sat down next to him on that bench. still not fully believing what was happening. Is it really you? I finally managed to say. He nodded slowly, and then he said something I'll never forget. I wondered if anyone would ever find me. That single sentence told me everything and nothing at the same time. He wasn't confused about who he was. He knew exactly who I was. He knew exactly how long it had been. This wasn't a case of memory loss or a mix-up. This was something else entirely. I asked him straight out. They told us you died. We were told you passed away 6 years ago. What happened? He looked down at his hands for a long moment before he answered, and what he told me changed the way I saw my entire family. He said there had been a falling out, a serious one. Money was involved, an old family debt tied to property that should have gone to him, but got tangled up in a decision made behind his back. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Pride got in the way on both sides, and instead of fixing it, certain people in my family chose something easier. They chose to erase him instead. It was easier to tell the rest of us he had died than to explain why he was cut off. Easier to grieve a man than to admit they had pushed him out. I sat there in shock. All those years of missing him, of thinking about him, of wishing I could have said goodbye properly, none of that needed to happen. It was a lie built to protect a decision, not to protect me. I went home that night, and I confronted the one relative who I knew had to be at the center of it. And when I laid it all out, the silence on the other end of that conversation told me everything I already suspected. They didn't deny it.
The days after that conversation were some of the strangest of my life. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was angry. Angry at the years I lost. Angry that I mourned a man who was alive this whole time, sitting somewhere alone, thinking nobody wanted to find him. But I didn't let that anger control what happened next. The first thing I did was make sure he wasn't going back to that bench. I brought him home with me that same night. He didn't have much with him, just a small bag and the clothes he was wearing. Seeing how little he had left after everything he used to have was one of the hardest things I've ever had to look at. Over the next few days, I asked him more questions. Where had he been living? How long had he been without a real home? He told me it had been almost 2 years since he lost the small apartment he was renting after the money from that family dispute ran out and he had nowhere else to turn. 2 years. Sleeping in shelters when he could and on benches when he couldn't. 2 years, while the rest of us believed he was already gone. I got him to a doctor first. He hadn't seen one in a long time, and thankfully, aside from exhaustion and being underweight, he was going to be okay. That alone felt like a small miracle. Then came the harder part, facing the rest of the family. I called a meeting. Not an easy one. I sat everyone down and I told them what I found, and what I now knew. Some of them broke down immediately, guilt they'd clearly been carrying quietly for years. Others got defensive, tried to explain, tried to justify it. But once the truth was out in the open, there was no putting it back. It wasn't a perfect reunion. Some relationships in my family still haven't fully healed from this, and honestly, I'm not sure they ever will. But my grandfather, he's safe now. He has a home. He has people checking in on him every single day. And most importantly, he knows he was found. He knows somebody came looking. Sometimes he still says it to me, almost like he can't quite believe it. I wondered if anyone would ever find me. Every time he says it, I remind him of the same thing. I did. This whole experience taught me something I don't think I'll ever forget. We walk past people every single day. On the street, in stores, at bus stops. And we don't think twice about most of them. They're just background noise in our busy lives. But every single one of those people has a story. Some of them have a family somewhere, wondering where they are. Some of them have a name that used to be said with love around a dinner table. I almost walked past my own grandfather. Twice. If I hadn't turned around that second time, I might have gone the rest of my life, never knowing he was still alive. Never knowing that a decision made by someone else behind closed doors cost him 2 years of his life on the streets and cost me 2 years I could have spent with him. It made me realize how easily people become invisible. Not because they disappear, but because we stop looking. And it made me realize how easily families can convince themselves that a lie is kinder than the truth, when really, it just delays the pain and makes it worse. So here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever walked past someone and wondered if you really knew them? Or has something like this ever happened in your own family? A secret, a lie, something buried that eventually came out? I'd really like to know. Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you the way it moved me telling it, there are more stories like this on this channel. Some of them, honestly, are even harder to believe than this one. So if you want more of these real, raw stories, stick around. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.